And now everyone can see it, Reed said. The rebel fleet had engaged the imperial ships, drawing them away from the palace. The Empire's greatest secret was exposed to the galaxy. The Phantom's mission wasn't simply destruction. They needed to disable the palace's control systems that coordinated imperial forces across the galaxy. Without those systems, the Empire would lose its ability to respond to the growing rebellion. Their internal sensors are still active, Blake warned as they approached the palace. We're going to be visible the moment we dock. Reed smiled. Then it's time to show them exactly who's been haunting them. Lieutenant Stone, prepare to drop our cloak. Let's give them their first and last look at the ghost ship that brought down their empire. The Phantom to cloak directly in front of the palace's main docking bay. For a few seconds, Imperial guards stared in shock at the ship that appeared from nowhere. The vessel was smaller than they'd imagined, sleek and dark against the stars. Then chaos erupted. Boarding parties detected in multiple sections, Stone reported, monitoring the palace's internal communications. They're panicking, trying to evacuate their leaders. Too late, Reed said. The devices they'd planted throughout the system activated their secondary programs, creating sensor ghosts of the Phantom appearing at multiple points around the palace. The Empire's leaders had nowhere to run. The real Phantom locked onto the palace's main control center. Blake's carefully designed computer virus, uploaded through the ancient defense grid's backdoors, began shutting down systems throughout the structure. Imperial command channels going dark. Stone reported with satisfaction. Fleet coordination is breaking down. Rebel forces are advancing on all fronts. Reed opened a channel to all frequencies. Attention, Imperial forces. Your leaders have lost control. The system that kept you united is gone. Every world you enslaved is now free to choose its own path. The Empire ends today. The palace's mighty engines died. Its energy rings flickered and faded. Across the galaxy, Imperial ships received their last orders. Stand down or be destroyed by the growing rebel fleet. Some Imperial captains tried to fight. Most surrendered when they realized the power that had controlled them for so long had finally fallen. Hours later, as rebel ships secured the palace, Reed recorded his final log about the Empire. They never understood the price of ruling through fear. Fear only works if your subjects believe you're invincible. One crack in that belief, one ghost ship that proves you can be beaten. And fear becomes hope. Hope becomes courage. Courage becomes rebellion. And rebellion becomes freedom. The Phantom's crew gathered on their bridge, watching the sun rise over a nearby planet. After a year of hiding in shadows, they had finally brought light to the darkness of Imperial rule. Earth Command wants to know our next mission, Stone said. There are still Imperial holdouts refusing to surrender. Then we'll remind them why they learned to fear shadows, Reed replied. The Empire thought they could control the galaxy through overwhelming force. We proved that a single ship, clever tactics, and the courage to act could bring down the mightiest power they'd ever seen. The Phantom vanished once more into the darkness between the stars. The Empire had fallen. But there would always be those who needed a ghost ship to haunt their nightmares. And now every tyrant in the galaxy would have to wonder, is that just a sensor ghost, or is something watching from the shadows, waiting to strike? 1 year after the Phantom's first strike against the Empire, Captain Reed stood in his quarters studying the secret transmission from Earth Command. Intelligence agents had finally discovered something they'd spent years searching for: the location of the Imperial Palace, the true seat of power hidden within the Empire's heavily defended core worlds. The Empire's leaders had grown paranoid as their control crumbled. Rebellion swept through the outer systems. Their once mighty fleet was scattered, chasing rebels and investigating accidents that seemed to follow their ships like a curse. But they still held absolute power in their core systems, protected by the largest concentration of warships ever assembled. Reed called his crew together to share the intelligence. Lieutenant Stone's eyes widened as she saw the palace's defenses: 3 layers of sensor nets, automated defense platforms, and over 200 capital ships. They're daring anyone to try attacking them. And that's their final mistake, Reed said. They still think like bullies, believing that bigger weapons and stronger shields will save them. They haven't learned anything from the past year. The Phantom's crew had learned plenty. Every mission had taught them new ways to use their stealth technology. Every Imperial response had revealed new weaknesses to exploit. Now it was time to use everything they'd learned. The plan came together over 3 days of careful preparation. The Rebel Alliance provided critical intelligence from their spies. The miners from the Dark Reach shared secrets from the ancient ruins about defeating advanced shield systems. Earth Command gave them full authority to end the Empire once and for all. "We'll need help for this," Reed told his crew. "Signal the rebel fleet. Tell them to prepare for Operation Nightfall." The Phantom spent 2 weeks ghosting through Imperial defenses, planting specially designed devices throughout the core systems. Each one looked like normal maintenance equipment, ignored by Imperial sensors. Stone worked with rebel technicians, synchronizing the device's timing to the second. On the day of the attack, the Empire's leaders celebrated their latest victory. Their ships had destroyed a rebel base, proving their power was still absolute. They didn't know the base had been empty, a deliberate sacrifice to draw their attention. "All devices showing ready," Blake reported from engineering. Rebel fleet standing by at the rally point. Reed looked at his crew, the people who had helped him haunt an empire into collapse. "Send the signal. Operation Nightfall begins now." Across the core systems, the hidden devices activated simultaneously. Each one generated a false sensor reading of a massive rebel fleet jumping into the system. Imperial commanders panicked, ordering their ships to respond to attacks that weren't there. The real rebel fleet struck from the opposite direction, emerging from the Starfire nebula where they'd been hiding. The Empire's carefully arranged defenses were already broken, ships rushing to intercept Phantom invasions. Through it all, the Phantom slipped silently toward the Imperial palace. The confusion meant most sensor operators ignored the small anomalies that might have revealed their presence. Those who did notice something strange suddenly found their systems malfunctioning in mysterious ways. "We're approaching the palace's inner defense grid," Wells reported. "This is where it gets interesting." The palace was protected by technology the Empire's founders had stolen from ancient ruins similar to those found in the Dark Reach. But thanks to the miners' discovery, the Phantom's crew understood these defenses better than the Empire did. "Execute override sequence," Reed ordered. The Phantom transmitted codes that were thousands of years old. The palace's outer defenses recognized them as administrator commands from their original makers, shutting down automatically. Imperial technicians scrambled to understand what was happening. By the time they realized their ancient defense grid had been compromised, the Phantom was already through. "My God," Stone whispered as they got their first look at the palace itself. The massive structure floated in space, surrounded by rings of energy that made it look like a small sun. No wonder they kept this hidden. The power readings are off the scale. By the time Imperial rescue ships arrived, they found their cruisers' crews babbling about ghost ships riding lightning from the haunted nebula. The Empire's leaders dismissed such stories as space madness caused by nebula radiation. But the tale spread, adding to the growing legend of the rebels' mysterious protector. The Phantom continued through the nebula, using its dangerous reputation as cover to deliver advanced stealth systems to rebel forces. Each delivery was timed precisely, coordinated through coded messages hidden in normal space traffic. Stone worked with rebel engineers, teaching them how to hide their ships from Imperial sensors. The Resistance couldn't match the Phantom's complete invisibility, but even basic stealth capabilities gave them a huge advantage. "The Empire's getting desperate," Wells reported during a staff meeting. "They're pulling ships from their core worlds to hunt for rebel bases. Half their frontier sectors are barely patrolled now." Reed nodded. The Empire's obsession with finding the rebels' secret weapon, the ghost ship that had started all this, was leaving them vulnerable everywhere. "Show me their fleet deployments from 6 months ago compared to now." The tactical display told the story clearly. The Empire's once orderly patrol patterns had become chaotic. They were reacting to every rumor, chasing shadows across hundreds of light years, while rebels slipped through the gaps in their coverage. Message from the mining colony leadership, Stone announced. Their scientists have decoded more of the ancient ruins data. There's something about the Empire they think we need to see. The decoded files revealed a stunning truth. The Empire's founders had once been rebels themselves, fighting against an even older empire. They had won their freedom using hit-and-run tactics, striking from hidden bases before their enemies could respond. They'd forgotten their own history, Reed said softly. They became the very thing they once fought against, and now they're making the same mistakes their old enemies made. The Phantom's next mission was already being planned. The Rebel Alliance was growing stronger every day, but the Empire's core worlds were still heavily defended. They needed to find a way to strike at the heart of Imperial power. That evening, Reed recorded a new log entry. The Empire thought their greatest strength was their massive fleet, their unlimited resources, their absolute control. They never understood that those things made them predictable. They had to protect too much, patrol too far, control too many worlds. Now they're watching their power slip away, and they still don't know why. The crew gathered in the mess hall, sharing stories they'd heard from rebel contacts. Imperial governors were fighting each other for ships to protect their sectors. Colonies were declaring independence. The Empire's iron grip on the galaxy was failing. They'll figure it out eventually, Stone said. That one ship started all of this. No, Reed corrected her. We just showed others it was possible to fight back. The Empire's real enemy isn't us. It's every world, every species, every person they ever tried to control through fear. We just had to prove they weren't invincible. The Phantom moved silently through space, carrying hope to those who had lost it and fear to those who had never known it. The Empire's days of absolute power were ending, one invisible strike at a time. News of rebellion spread through the Empire's territories like wildfire. 6 months after the Dark Reach incident, colonies that had been quiet for generations began to resist their imperial masters. The Empire's response was predictably brutal, but their warships kept suffering mysterious accidents en route to crush the rebels. The Phantom's crew worked tirelessly, pushing both themselves and their ship's capabilities to the limit. They had learned to strike multiple targets in quick succession, making it seem like Imperial ships were cursed by bad luck that followed them from system to system. Reed stood on his bridge, watching tactical displays show the latest uprising. The mining colony from the Dark Reach had found allies among other independent worlds. Their ancient ruins had contained more than just powerful technology. They held star maps showing hidden supply routes through Imperial space. Status report on Operation Wildfire, Reed ordered, using their code name for supporting the growing rebellion. Stone pulled up the latest data. Rebel groups have hit Imperial targets in 12 systems this week. They're using the secret routes we leaked to them. Imperial forces are stretched thin trying to respond to attacks they can't predict. The Empire's mighty fleet was facing something they'd never trained for, an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish into supposedly secure territories. Every rebel success inspired more worlds to resist. Message from Earth Command, Wells announced. Priority 1. Reed read the transmission carefully. After months of watching the Empire weaken, Earth's leaders had made a bold decision. It was time to share some of their stealth technology with trusted rebel groups. The Phantom would make the deliveries. Plot a course to the rendezvous point, Reed ordered, and show me the status of Imperial patrols in that sector. The tactical display revealed a worrying sight. The Empire had positioned massive fleet elements along all major travel routes. They were desperate to catch the rebels' mysterious supporters. They're watching every normal approach, Stone said, but there might be another way. She highlighted a dangerous-looking region of space, the Starfire nebula. The Empire thinks it's impossible to navigate. Reed studied the swirling clouds of energized gas. The nebula's radiation would blind most ships' sensors, but the Phantom wasn't most ships. Blake, can our stealth systems handle that level of interference? The chief engineer grinned. Better than handle it, sir. The nebula's radiation will actually help mask our energy signature. We'll look like just another spark in the storm. The Phantom altered course, heading for the deadly beautiful clouds of the Starfire Nebula. As they entered the outer layers, the ship's sensors adapted to filter out the intense radiation. Normal ships would be flying blind. The Phantom saw everything clearly. They weren't alone in the nebula. Scattered throughout the gas clouds were the wrecks of ships that had tried to navigate its dangers. The Empire had never bothered to map safe routes through this natural barrier. Multiple Imperial alert signals. Stone reported suddenly. A rebel convoy is under attack just outside the nebula. 5 Imperial cruisers against 3 cargo ships. Reed checked their mission timeline. They could still make their rendezvous if they hurried. But those rebel ships might be carrying refugees, supplies, or fighters needed for the resistance. Show me a route through this section of the nebula, he ordered. Let's remind the Empire why they're starting to fear these dangerous regions of space. The Phantom accelerated, riding the nebula's energy currents. They emerged from the clouds like a lightning bolt, their hull crackling with the nebula's power. To the Imperial ship's sensors, it would look like a natural energy surge from the nebula. The surge struck the Imperial formation before they could react. Electrical systems overloaded. Shields failed. The rebel ships seized their chance and escaped, leaving their attackers drifting and confused. Reed smiled. His crew didn't just think like ghosts anymore. They thought like cosmic forces of nature. Make it happen. The Phantom moved silently through the asteroid field, using its sophisticated sensors to calculate precise trajectories. They waited until the Imperial ships were in position around the mining colony. A single plasma burst, disguised as a magnetic pulse from the ruins, struck a carefully chosen asteroid. It tumbled into another, then another. Within minutes, a cascade of collisions threatened the Imperial ships. The cruisers' powerful shields protected them from direct hits, but they couldn't maintain formation in the chaos. The science vessel, with its weaker defenses, took heavy damage. Through it all, the Phantom danced through the field untouched, its hull indistinguishable from the asteroids around it. Each time an Imperial ship tried to stabilize, another wave of debris would force them back. The miners are powering up their ships, Stone reported. The Imperial captains are too busy saving themselves to stop them. Reed watched as the mining ships escaped into deep space, carrying their discovery with them. The Imperial fleet, battered and humiliated, would limp home with nothing to show for their mission. Later, in his quarters, Reed reviewed the day's events. The Empire had lost more than ships today. They'd lost another chance to grow stronger. More importantly, they'd lost face in front of civilian witnesses who would spread the story. The Phantom's next targets were already chosen. Sensor stations, supply lines, patrol routes, anything that helped the Empire control their vast territory. But now they had a new mission too. The miners would need protection to study their discovery safely. Computer, begin log. Reed spoke. The Empire's greatest weapon was always fear. Civilizations surrendered because they believed resistance was hopeless. Now the Empire itself is learning to fear. They see threats in every shadow, enemies behind every asteroid. And they're right to be afraid. The crew gathered for their daily briefing, spirits high after their success. But Stone had troubling news. Imperial Command is starting to think these accidents aren't random. They're increasing security everywhere. Good, Reed replied. Let them split their forces trying to guard everything at once. We don't need to destroy their fleet to defeat them. We just need to keep them looking the wrong way while their empire crumbles around them. The Phantom moved on, leaving the dark reach behind. In its wake, stories spread through the frontier worlds. Stories about Imperial ships destroyed by freak accidents, about mysterious forces protecting the weak from Imperial aggression. The Empire's leaders raged and threatened, but they couldn't fight an enemy they couldn't see. They didn't realize that their greatest defeat wasn't losing ships or bases. It was losing their aura of invincibility. The ghost ship that no one noticed had become the nightmare that haunted an Empire's dreams. And it was far from finished. The Imperial High Command war room buzzed with nervous energy as admirals and generals argued over star maps. In the 3 months since the Garden System disaster, mysterious accidents had plagued their forces. Supply bases exploded from apparent fuel leaks. Patrol ships disappeared in navigation accidents. Communication stations went dark from power failures. None of them noticed the real pattern. Every destroyed facility and lost ship had been involved in attacking peaceful worlds. The Phantom watched their confusion through tapped communications. Captain Reed and his crew had spent the last months striking at carefully chosen targets. Each attack looked like a different kind of accident, but together they were slowly crippling the Empire's ability to expand. Their response times are getting slower, Lieutenant Stone reported, studying tactical data. They pulled ships from frontier sectors to guard their core worlds. The Empire is starting to fear shadows. Reed nodded. Fear was a weapon they hadn't expected to use, but it worked better than plasma cannons. The Empire's officers now jumped at every sensor ghost, wasting resources chasing false alarms. New transmission intercepted. Wells called from his station. A mining colony in the Dark Reach is asking for help. Says they've discovered something in the deep asteroids. The crew listened as the transmission played. The mining colony had found ancient ruins inside an asteroid, ruins that suggested a civilization far more advanced than the Empire. The miners wanted Imperial scientists to study their discovery. Stone's hands flew across her tactical display. Sir, if these ruins are what I think they are, the Empire will want to steal any advanced technology they find. They'll kill the miners to keep it secret. Plot a course, Reed ordered. But first, show me everything we know about this mining colony. The Phantom's databases held detailed records of every sector they'd studied. The Dark Reach miners were independent prospectors who'd found rich mineral deposits in a dense asteroid field. They'd managed to stay free by paying heavy taxes to the Empire. As the Phantom approached the Dark Reach, they intercepted more transmissions. An Imperial science vessel was already on its way, along with a heavily armed escort fleet. The Empire wasn't taking chances with potentially valuable technology. Look at these energy readings from the ruins, Blake said from engineering. If the miner scans are right, there's something generating power in there. After thousands of years. Reed studied the data. The ruins' power signature was unlike anything in their records. If the Empire got their hands on that technology, they would become even more dangerous. The Phantom slipped into the asteroid field, its adaptive hull now mimicking the rocky surfaces around it. They watched as the Imperial ships arrived, 3 large cruisers surrounding a science vessel. They're ordering the miners to evacuate. Stone reported, monitoring communications, claiming the site is unsafe for civilian activity. Reed had seen this before. Once the miners left, they would never return. They'd probably never leave the Imperial ships alive. Options. The asteroid field works in our favor, Wells said. All this mineral content plays havoc with sensors. One small push could start a chain reaction of collisions. And if we time it right, Blake added, we could use the ruins' power signature to mask our own energy readings completely. The Phantom released a carefully calibrated plasma burst, disguised as a solar flare. It struck the nearest Imperial shield and began to resonate. The effect spread from ship to ship as their synchronized shields transmitted the interference pattern. Warning alarms blared across the Imperial fleet as shield generators overloaded. Secondary explosions rippled through the formation. Ships lost power as their energy systems crashed. The mighty Imperial fleet began to drift, their crews scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. The Garden Worlds watched in amazement as their invaders' ships went dark. The Imperial commander's final transmission blamed his engineers for failing to account for basic shield dynamics. No one suspected an invisible warship had turned their own technology against them. Hours later, as rescue ships began arriving to help the stranded Imperial fleet, Reed recorded a new log entry. The Empire's greatest weakness isn't their shield technology. It's their belief that they have no weaknesses. Today we learned that a small force, striking at the right point, can defeat an enemy 1,000 times stronger. The Phantom's crew gathered in the mess hall that evening, their mood both celebratory and thoughtful. They had saved billions of lives and dealt the Empire their largest military disaster in centuries. But they had also revealed that someone could hurt them. They'll be more careful now, Stone said, studying reports of the Empire's initial investigation. They'll space their ships further apart, modify their shield frequencies. Good, Reed replied. Let them waste resources preparing for the wrong threat. They're looking for a powerful enemy that can challenge their fleets. They'll never suspect that their real weakness is their own pride. What's our next move, sir? Wells asked. Reed looked at his crew, no longer just observers, but warriors fighting a war the Empire didn't even know had begun. We find more weaknesses. The Empire is vast, but that makes them vulnerable. They can't protect everything. We'll study their patterns, their habits, their mistakes, and when they least expect it, we'll be there, Stone finished. The ghost they never see coming. As the Phantom slipped away from the garden system, the Empire's leaders raged about their humiliation. They doubled patrols, upgraded shields, and hunted for signs of new enemy weapons, but they never thought to look for a single ship hiding in plain sight. Their quest for absolute power had made them forget an ancient truth. Empires don't always fall to stronger armies. Sometimes they fall to clever enemies who turn their own strength against them. The Phantom's crew had learned this lesson well. Now they would teach it to the Empire, one invisible strike at a time. 2 months after their first intervention, the Phantom drifted silently near the edge of the garden system. The crew watched through their sensors as Imperial ships gathered in increasing numbers. The garden worlds were home to a peaceful civilization that had only achieved spaceflight 50 years ago. Their planets were rich in rare minerals, which meant the Empire had come to take them. Lieutenant Stone stood at her tactical station, her fingers clenched tight as she watched the Imperial fleet grow larger each day. 17 capital ships now, sir. The largest invasion fleet we've seen yet. Captain Reed nodded grimly. After their success against the corvettes, he had wanted to do more. But orders from Earth remained strict. Observe only. The Empire was too powerful to challenge directly. Yet watching another civilization about to be destroyed tested everyone's resolve. They don't even have proper warships, Navigation Officer Wells said quietly, looking at scans of the Garden World's defensive fleet. Their ships were little more than armed cargo vessels, no match for Imperial weaponry. Chief Engineer Blake spoke up from his station. Captain, I've been studying the Imperial fleet formations. There's something odd about their shield harmonics. When they group their ships too closely, the energy fields create interference patterns. Stone turned quickly to her displays. He's right, sir. Look at these readings. Their shield technology relies on synchronized frequencies. If those frequencies were disrupted, she paused, her eyes widening. We could make it look like an accident, a natural phenomenon that their own arrogance caused. Reed walked to her station, studying the data. The Empire's overwhelming power had made them careless. They clustered their ships too close together, never expecting anyone could threaten them. Show me the calculations, Lieutenant. The next hour was spent in intense discussion. The Phantom's sensors had gathered years of data on Imperial technology. Now the data revealed a critical weakness. Their mighty shields could be turned against them, if someone invisible could get close enough. A signal from the Garden Worlds interrupted their planning. The Empire had sent their demands. Immediate surrender and resource rights to all planets, or face destruction. The Garden people had 12 hours to decide. Reed looked at his crew. They all knew what would happen either way. Surrender meant slavery. Resistance meant death. The Empire never left potential rivals alive, no matter how peaceful. Lieutenant Stone, Reed said finally, prepare a detailed analysis of the fleet's shield harmonics. Navigation, plot us a course through their formation. Make it look like we're a piece of debris caught in their own engine wash. Engineering, I want our energy emissions masked as background radiation. The crew moved with purpose now. This would be different from disabling 2 corvettes. They were about to take on the heart of an Imperial invasion fleet. The Phantom slipped between the massive Imperial ships like a ghost. Up close, the Empire's arrogance was even more apparent. Their ships were packed tightly together, crews confident in their superior shields. None of them noticed the shifting patterns in the debris field around them. In position, Wells reported softly. The Phantom now floated in the center of the Imperial formation. Shield frequency analysis complete, Stone said. If we release an encoded burst of plasma energy here, it will create a cascade reaction through their entire formation. Their own shields will amplify the effect. Their investigation would show their shields failed because they were too close together, Blake added. The energy buildup would look like a natural consequence of their formation. Reed stared at the Imperial ships surrounding them. This wasn't just about saving the Garden Worlds anymore. This was a chance to show the Empire they weren't invulnerable. Do it, he ordered. The transport's engines flared as it tried to escape. One of the corvettes fired a warning shot across its bow. Reed knew what would happen next. The Empire would disable the ship, board it, and either enslave or kill everyone aboard. They'd blame it on pirates and add another sector to their protected territories. Sir, Blake called from engineering. We could take both corvettes before they knew what hit them. Our new plasma cannons would look just like drive malfunctions from the outside. Reed gripped the railing of his command station. We have our orders, Chief. We can't risk. A scream cut through the bridge audio pickups. The transport's distress call had switched to an open channel. A woman's voice begged for help as children cried in the background. The corvettes fired again, striking the transport's engines. Reed closed his eyes. 3 years of watching atrocities had worn down his resolve. How many more innocent people had to die while they gathered data? The Empire wouldn't stop until someone stood up to them. Lieutenant Stone, he said quietly, what's the probability of those corvettes successfully reporting our presence if we intervene? Stone's fingers flew across her tactical display. If we time it right. 0, sir. We can make it look like they hit some unstable debris that caused cascade failures in their power systems. The Empire's own investigation would conclude it was an accident. Reed nodded slowly. Navigation, plot us a course through that debris field. Engineering, ready weapons but mask them as radiation spikes. Medical, stand by for potential survivors. He straightened his uniform. We're not supposed to be heroes. We're supposed to be ghosts. Let's make sure we stay that way. The Phantom glided through space, a shadow among shadows. The Imperial corvettes never saw it coming. 2 precise plasma bursts, disguised as debris impacts, struck their power cores. Both ships went dark, their crews barely having time to realize something was wrong before emergency systems forced them into hibernation. The transport's panicked crew couldn't believe their luck when the pirates suddenly lost power. They quickly jumped to safety, leaving the corvettes to be found later by Imperial rescue teams. The official report would blame poor maintenance and navigational errors for the accident. But that night, as Reed sat in his quarters writing his log, he knew something had changed. They had crossed a line. The Phantom was no longer just an observer. It had become a hunter. Computer, encrypt personal log. Reed spoke to the empty room. 3 years of watching the Empire's cruelty has taught us more than just their military capabilities. It's shown us their greatest weakness. They think they're invulnerable. Today proved they're not. The Phantom was built to gather intelligence, but maybe it has a greater purpose. Every empire in history fell when it became too arrogant to see the threats right in front of it. The Stellar Empire doesn't see us because they don't believe anyone could hide from their power. He smiled grimly. That's going to be their first mistake. And if I'm right, it won't be their last. The Phantom continued its silent patrol through Imperial space, gradually working its way closer to the Empire's core worlds. Its crew had learned patience. They had mastered the art of invisibility. And now they had taken their first step toward becoming something the Empire had never faced before. An enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, and wouldn't notice until it was too late. In the endless dark between the stars, humanity's ghost ship waited for its moment. The Empire had no idea that their days of unchallenged power were coming to an end. They would never see the knife in the dark until it was buried in their heart. The stars stretched endlessly across the viewport as Captain James Reed stood quietly on the bridge of his ship, his eyes focused on a distant Imperial cruiser that moved through space like a shark through dark waters. The massive vessel had no idea that the experimental warship Phantom floated less than 10,000 kilometers away. To the Empire sensors, the Phantom was nothing more than a piece of space debris, one of countless fragments drifting through this sector. Reed ran his hand through his graying hair and smiled slightly. 3 years of hiding in plain sight had proven that the Phantom's stealth systems worked better than anyone had expected. The ship's revolutionary quantum camouflage could bend light around its hull, while its adaptive surface mimicked the exact composition of nearby space debris. Even its engine emissions disappeared into the background radiation of space. "Status report," Reed said softly, though he hardly needed to whisper. No one could hear them out here. Lieutenant Maria Stone looked up from her tactical station. Her dark eyes reflected the glow of multiple displays showing sensor data. "The Imperial cruiser is maintaining its patrol pattern, sir. They haven't deviated from their scheduled route in 6 months." She paused, then added, "They're getting lazy." "Comfortable," Reed corrected. "The Empire has ruled this sector for 300 years. They don't expect anyone to challenge them anymore." The bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Chief Engineer Blake monitored the stealth systems with the same careful attention he'd shown since their mission began. Navigation Officer Wells made tiny adjustments to keep them drifting naturally with the surrounding debris field. Medical Officer Gray wasn't on the bridge. She was probably in her lab again, studying the biological weapons the Empire used on their victims. Reed walked to the main tactical display where a holographic map showed the current extent of Imperial territory. Red dots marked thousands of star systems under their control. The Empire had grown steadily for centuries, absorbing or destroying every civilization they encountered. Humanity had avoided their attention so far only by appearing too primitive and resource-poor to be worth conquering. But Reed knew that wouldn't last forever. Sooner or later, the Empire would realize that humans were advancing too quickly. When that happened, the invasion would begin. That's why the Phantom existed, to gather intelligence that might give humanity a fighting chance when that day came. A soft chime drew Reed's attention. "Captain," Stone called out, "long-range sensors are picking up a distress signal. Looks like a civilian transport under attack by pirates." Reed frowned. Pirates in this sector usually meant Imperial ships hunting easy targets. "Show me." The tactical display shifted to show a small transport vessel trying to evade 2 Imperial corvettes. The corvettes were using Imperial military formations, but had painted over their identification markings. Typical false flag operations that the Empire used to justify protecting sectors from piracy. "The transport?" Reed asked. "Scanning," Stone replied. "Looks like refugees from the Arcadian system. The Empire annexed them last month." Her voice held barely controlled anger. The Empire's annexation typically meant enslaving the population and stripping the planet of resources. Reed watched the unfolding scene with growing tension. The Phantom's orders were clear: observe and gather intelligence only. Direct intervention risked exposing Earth's technological capabilities before they were ready to defend themselves. But watching innocent people die while doing nothing went against everything Reed believed in.